What's going on, folks? This is Colion Noir, and this is another beautiful day for CN Live. It's been a pretty eventful day, as most of you all are aware. We had a bit of a situation at Ohio State where there was a perceived active shooter, but turned out to be a knife attack and a vehicle attack. But before we start getting into the dark and ugly, just take a look at this footage. I woke up this morning and immediately got the notification on my phone, as I usually do, about pretty much anything that goes on in the gun industry or the gun world for that matter. And I'm not going to lie, immediately my mind went to active shooter because that's what the news was telling me. Well, but, you know, in many ways, it kind of restates the fact that we can't be too quick to jump to conclusions whenever we have situations like this. Because then you have situations like this where you have the news telling us that as an active shooter, everybody was responding to it as if it was an active shooter. And then come to find out, as the details started to come in, we found out it was a knife attack or a vehicle attack. Now, to be honest, this really wouldn't make much of a difference because the loss of life is the loss of life. Injury is injury, whether it comes by way of a firearm, a knife, or a vehicle. However, we've lived in an environment where there's just been this blatant attempt to vilify the firearm and anybody who associates with them, that now we find ourselves constantly engaged in this conversation about whether or not it was a gun that was used or whether or not it was a gun that was used. And we end up defending pretty much pointless aspects of things that we don't really need to be talking about. Because when we take things and we look at the situation from a 30,000-foot view, the only thing that really matters here is how do we go about putting ourselves and the people in our universities in the best position to protect themselves? That's all that really matters, especially because we understand that things like this, events like this, tend to happen and will continue to happen because it is the world that we live in. I love the idea of a utopia where I don't have to worry about those things. I think people misconstrue the notion of me being a concealed carrier. I don't like the fact that I have to carry a gun or the fact that I feel like I should have to carry a gun. It's not fun for me, at least that component of it. Sure, I enjoy firearms from the standpoint of going out to the range and shooting and plinking and having fun. And even from a martial arts standpoint where I just, for the sake of the ability to manipulate and handle a firearm in a certain way with a certain proficiency, I love those components of it. I love understanding the physics and the dynamics of different guns and enjoying them the same way that people enjoy cars. However, the self-defense notion of it for me is something that is just a necessity because I understand reality. I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist. And I understand that no matter what we do, no matter what type of ideologies we try to implement, whatever progressive notions or movements we try to push on everybody else in this world, there will be evil in this world. There will be evil people in this world, and they will engage in evil activities. And we see this time and time again. And we've got to come to a point where we understand that. At a certain point, all the talking, all of the saber rattling, all the yelling and screaming back and forth about ideologies, this, conservative, liberals, all of that, none of it really matters at a certain point. When somebody's standing before you and they're trying to take your life, the only thing that matters is being in the best position to defend yourself against it. Those are the conversations we're supposed to be having, but we're not having them because we have people who are trying to push agendas based on the appearances of certain firearms or the fact that there was a firearm involved to begin with. But here we are. I wake up, I get a notification, active shooter. Then we find out it wasn't an active shooter. So now all of a sudden, now what are we talking about? And then you have the whole notion with the media that, you know, they're constantly chasing blood. I think in many respects they would have loved for this to be a mass shooting, especially considering how vehemently they are opposed to the idea of our next president. They would have loved something like this. They would have jumped all over it as if somehow that proved a certain point, which is ironic because they do this time and time and time again. But yet, again, here we are. That being said, over the weekend, I went down to Houston and I noticed something that I didn't really pick up on before. I never realized how many gun stores there were in Houston. I spent a good amount of time driving around just visiting different family members. And I just kind of just started counting as I was driving down the streets and noticing how many gun stores there were in Houston. And I gotta say, for a lot of people, for somebody who's not really into firearms and they hear something like this, you know, it kind of takes them aback a little bit and they're like, I don't like that idea and I don't like that fact. But I got kind of happy about it. I love the fact that I'm kind of jealous because when I started getting into guns and firearms, I didn't have those options. My options for going to different gun stores are rather limited. But nonetheless, I got to say, kudos to Houston for having all the gun stores that a man could ever dream or want. So I just wanted to kind of go off on that little tangent before I forgot it. But joining me now to talk about the recent events of today is the wonderful and beautiful Dana Loesch. What's going on,
Colion? How are you? I tell you what, watching this OSU stuff, and I have my monitor on here, as I know you've been watching it, and everybody at NRA News has been watching it, and NRATV. The thing that gets me is how so many people, they want to be first, but they don't want to be correct. And it's enraging because I watched Tim Kaine, who was for a moment, he was so close to being vice president of the United States. I watched a number of gun control advocates. I watched a number of people in the media who are very much against Second Amendment practices, and they're very much against people who speak out for the Second Amendment, like yourself and me. I watched all of these people turn what was a attempted vehicular manslaughter, as well as attacks with, the stabbing rampage. They turned this into a mass shooting incident where the only shot that was fired, Colion, was the officer, as you know, the officer who arrived on scene and took out this 18-year-old, anywhere between 18 to 19-year-old student, Somali refugee, who took out this perpetrator. Yeah. Now, what gets me about this is it took them hours to walk this stuff back. I watched gun control advocates tweet this stuff out. I watched Tim Kaine tweet this stuff out. And Tim Kaine let that assertion, let that claim sit on social media for a couple of hours. And this was hours after the press conference where law enforcement said it wasn't a mass shooting incident. There was no active shooter situation. This was a guy with a knife. He tried to run over pedestrians with a car. Then he had a knife and he tried to go and stab and kill everybody. The only firearm that was present was the one that a law enforcement officer who, thank heavens, happened to be there to stop it. It's a gun-free zone. They actually had to call a guy back in with a gun to help people because the bad guy had a knife instead. This kind of stuff, they're still calling for gun control based on everything that happened today. This, I can't reiterate this enough. This is a gun-free zone. People are soft targets. Yep. Now, consider this. I'm going to walk this up to the very edge and just say, let's look at the coincidences here. First off, in their little terrorist magazine, ISIS was encouraging people, go and attack Americans, attack Westerners, attack the innocent in places like malls and out in the streets and in alleys, I think was one. They're telling people to go and act as these lone wolf terrorists, part of, how many lone wolves does it take to make a pack? So this follows the stabbing attack that was at a Minnesota deli. This also, a Columbus, Ohio deli. And this also follows the stabbing attack, Colion, that took place at the Minnesota mall. Now, all of these people had something in common in that the other two, previous two, had an ISIS affiliation, and they were all with knives. They were all young men. So this does bring up an interesting question as to whether or not this was a terror incident, number one. And number two, why do we have people out there trying to disarm law-abiding Americans like yourself, like myself, trying to make us into soft targets? I do not want to be afraid every time I go to a mall. I do not want to be afraid if I go somewhere with my kids thinking that a terrorist is going to get me and I may not have the means to defend myself because someone thought everyone was going to be safer if we were all soft targets.
You know what's interesting about this, what they're going to do? And people, I can hear people watching this and saying, okay, what's the big deal? They walked it back eventually, right? But people don't understand. What will happen is they'll let it sit there and let it stew. And so the people who come across it, who only gather their news from headlines and tweets, will see the tweet and then say, "Oh, there goes again that gun stuff. This is all the doing of the people who are fighting for gun rights and say all they want to do is cling to their guns." And then while the media quietly kind of shoves this whole incident under the rug. So there's never any real clarification for the people who got the wrong information to begin with. And then now you have a group of people who are now in line with the idea of being more anti-gun because they see or they perceive there to be this mass issue with people having access to firearms and killing a bunch of people like what happened today in Ohio, except that's not exactly what happened.
No,
You know.
exactly. And you you bring up an interesting point in how these individuals, they tried to walk it, some of them tried to walk it back. And one of the defenses that I saw, and this makes sense to a point and then it stops making sense.
Hmm.
I had an individual say to me, and I saw a number of lefty journalists try to argue this point with me, and they said, well, look, in the very beginning, when the text was sent out to students urging them to get to safety, it was described as an active shooter situation. It was an active shooter text. That's the system that the school has in place. That's fine and dandy. But then it stops making sense because these stories perpetuated even after the initial press conference where it was revealed that this perpetrator had a knife and used a vehicle. Even before then, before the press conference, when law enforcement was already confirming it to individual members of the press that this individual, this perpetrator, this criminal was using a knife and had also previously, right before the stabbing attacks, had used a car. Not only did these individuals the media still didn't change their headlines. Associated Press, Vox, and Salon, even though Salon's the equivalent of bathroom graffiti in a dive bar here in terms of internet news. But these people, these outlets still maintained that this was a shooting incident, even when they had to update later on in the story that, oh, no, wait, didn't actually involve a gun. It actually involved a knife and a car. Not only that, but the anti-gun lobbyists that are trying to influence and are heavily, they influence these lefty outlets. They still insist, well, it doesn't matter. We need gun control anyway. Imagine how many people would have been hurt if this guy had a gun. No. Imagine how quick this dude would have been taken down by a law-abiding gun owner that had a concealed carry permit and was there at a college campus.
Why are people so quick to undermine the ability of citizens with firearms when we have consistent evidence of this happening? It's not like we're talking about things that we have no examples of. Not only do we have examples of it, there are too many to count at this point. Right. But for some reason, the idea and the notion that somebody like me or you could use a firearm to stop somebody who's attacking me or you is incapable of ever happening. I've never really quite understood that. And I remember when I started down my journey of this firearm path, initially when I started to hear some of the anti-gun rhetoric in my mind, I'm like, okay, these are people who are well-intended and just misinformed. But after a certain point, when you start hearing the same rhetoric from the same people over and over and over again, in the face of all countering evidence, it starts to beg the question. It's like, okay, no, you're too smart to keep insisting on the same things, even though they're not true.
Right.
So it begs the question, why? Why? And you've asked it several times. And it's like, I can no longer give you the benefit of doubt of saying, well, you're well-intended, just misinformed. You have all the information. It's right there.
It's purposeful ignorance because they have a bigger agenda. They want people to be stupid of the facts. I had a number of people sit here and say, well, yeah, we do need gun control on campus because we really don't even, there's not even really a number that shows how many people. And I'm just, because I imagine that's what their intellect to be. I'm stereotyping them as Valley Girls for a reason. Yeah. With the hand motions and everything else, hair flips. They're drinking peppermint mochas, wearing Uggs and in leggings. But they're telling me, Colion, oh, well, we don't even really know how many people are saved by a gun anyway. You know why they don't report those numbers? Because those numbers don't exist. Actually, they do. In 2013, the president spent several million of our dollars commissioning a report from the CDC that, in fact, concluded that concealed carry and carrying of firearms is a great deterrent to criminal activity committed around or against you. And I have the most joy. I'm going to tell you, this holiday season, Colion, nothing brings me more joy. Nothing expands my heart so much as tweeting out that link when people are wrong and showing them, no, a report was done in 2013. Yeah. And in fact, what that report did conclude is that on average, throughout a single year, there are, in fact, 2.3 million instances of DGU annually. And in 93% of those cases, all the lawful firearm owner has to do is simply brandish their firearm. They don't even have to squeeze the trigger because criminals are poorly trained. They're chickens. They're cowards. That's why they use these ridiculous ambush tactics. Mm-hmm. And if everyone was lawfully armed and you had all these NRA members everywhere, I'm telling you what, criminals would be more afraid than the law-abiding right now. That's for sure.
And you know what? It's interesting, though, because when you do point that out, they'll then try to attack the source.
The CDC.
Exactly, right? The same CDC that they'll use as a quotation as well. They can
call up Barack Obama and say, we are so angry at you for commissioning this report that Colion and Dana are using right now in NRATV to completely debunk our narrative. Well, that sucks for you. But here's the thing. This is the reality in which we live. We are safer as a lawfully armed society than not. Like I said, we are at a time when the warfare has changed. The battlefield does not look like what some of these anti-gun lobbyists think it looks like. They're in the redcoats phase. They think that everyone agrees to terms of battle, that everyone agrees to what the battlefield looks like, that the opposing team, as it were, they all wear the same uniforms and they all look alike and they have little badges that represent them. No. That's not what it looks like. We're having Americans killed in malls. We're having Americans killed out in the streets. We see French people who are being mowed down simply watching a fireworks display in Nice. We have people who are being mowed down and shot en masse because they're watching a concert at the Bataclan. We see all of this. The battle has changed. The battlefield has changed. And it is absolutely idiotic to think that as long as we just lie prostrate in front of people and try to make them happy and we'll put away our guns and we'll pretend that this isn't happening that's going to somehow make us safer. No. This is how it should happen. You have somebody who goes into a mall or somebody that goes into a deli or somebody that wants to open up fire at somebody watching music at in a musical venue. All you have to do, that's it. That's all you have to hear. I'm so done with this. It is the Christmas season, Colion. Let me tell you something. I want to eat ham. I want to have eggnog. I want to have cranberry sauce. I want to have a can of cranberry and cut it like a loaf. I want to be able to go to the range and eat ham when I pause to reload, I want to be able to take a bite of ham because ho, ho, ho. All of that good stuff. And these people are harshing my mellow. You don't mess with my nut. That's my nut. You don't mess with it. It's making me mad.
God, I love you.
You know what I mean? Who doesn't eat a snack at the range? Come on.
Hey, I forget to actually eat when I go to the range quite often. Actually, I get all like wrapped in the pew pew, so I never come out of the smoke, right?
I have an ever-present supply of beef jerky. You just scoot on over to my stall.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, what I want to do right now is I want to take a quick break. And when we come back, a lot of people don't realize or know too much about your story about how you got into firearms to begin with. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that briefly when we come back from break.